Hey guys, welcome back. Episode 3, season 2 of Toni Told Me. And I'm really excited for today's episode because I'm going to be talking about life across the pond in the United States and some of the differences between living in America and living in the UK. Quite a fair number of you DM me to ask me about the process and how I find living in Texas in particular. So if you're thinking about moving, I feel like a lot of people are, by the way, because there seems to be a massive exodus happening in the UK for various reasons. We'll explore it more in Sisterhood Spotlight. But yeah, this is today's theme. Aside from that, I'm going to remind you to do the obvious. If you aren't subscribed to us on YouTube, please subscribe and follow us across podcast platforms, wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and be sure to follow us on social media as well at Toni Told Me Pod on Instagram and on TikTok. And of course, in case you missed episode 1 or episode 2 of season 2, we have a Patreon now, Toni Told Me Unfiltered, where I give you the raw, the unfiltered, the juicy content that I'm too shy to share on the main podcast. If you have any juicy topics for us that you would like to, you'd like us to explore on Patreon, make sure you subscribe to our Patreon and leave some comments or send us a message on them. By us, we obviously have a team. Producer Nisha on the line as always. Hi, Nisha.
Hello. I was just having a little drink of water whilst you were yapping away.
Sorry, I completely interrupted your water drinking.
Don't you worry about it.
Producer Nisha is here and she is going to kick off Tea Time with Toni. But before that, I'm going to give you a bit of an update. What have I been doing? I bought a walking pad. I bought a walking pad because I'm trying to get fitter as a result of this lovely, lovely thing on my finger. If you're watching from YouTube, you will see that I have an Aura ring on my finger. An Aura ring, for those of you who don't know, is basically a smart ring that measures your body and your vitals, your heart rate, your stress levels, all that good stuff. Taiwo got this for me like a month ago because I'd been banging on about it. I really wanted one. So he was like, okay, let me just get one for her. And I'm really loving it. I love the fact that I'm big on sleep and it measures my sleep. I wake up in the morning, I go straight to the app and it tells me basically whether I've had great sleep, average sleep, poor sleep, and it gives me like a readiness score for the day. It tells me if I'm like ultra ready for the day or if I'm just not ready for the day at all. It also measures my stress levels. Now, this feature Taiwo does not like because in the apartment, like when he's like stressing me out, well, it's not even stressing me out, but when he's like being playful, playing with me, I'm like, my Aura ring, I bet my stress levels are high. I'm going to check my Aura ring. You're boosting my stress levels. So he's like, why did I get you this bloody ring? Because all you do is talk about your stress levels. Anytime I ask you to do anything, I'm like, my stress levels, my Aura ring. But the reason why I was just so sure I wanted to get one is because I'd seen several TikToks, different women who talked about how their Aura ring spotted like major changes in their health before they even knew about it. There was one lady who had a cancer diagnosis. She had no idea that she was sick. And then her Aura ring told her that there are major signs of something straining her body. There was another lady who talked about how her Aura ring told her there were major signs of something straining her body. And she suspected that, could I be pregnant? She did a pregnancy test and she was pregnant. And even when I had a cold, just a humble, common cold, my Aura ring was like, there's something minor straining your body, like there's something wrong. But I knew obviously I had a cold because of the symptoms, but I was like, it's so sick how like it knows something is wrong. So this isn't an ad, by the way. Aura, unfortunately, are not sponsoring this video, although I feel like they should after what I've just shared with you. But I love this Aura ring. I highly recommend it, especially if you're like a hypochondriac like me. Maybe I shouldn't recommend it if you're a hypochondriac, but I really like it anyway. So yeah, that's a bit of an update from me. So I'm trying to get fit because my Aura ring tells me that I do not move my body enough. So taking its advice. If you're new here, this is the segment of our podcast called Tea Time with Toni, and it's basically our dilemma segment where our amazing producer, Anisha, pulls from various dilemmas we get sent from you guys, and I basically try my very best to answer them. So producer Anisha, please hit us with dilemma number 1.
Hello. So our first dilemma is from a guy. We've had a guy.
Okay.
I've dug deep in the inbox from when we had our little hiatus.
I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, so more guys, guys can listen to us as well. Write in. We appreciate it. So this one says, "Hey Tony, I'm a male listener originally from the US, now living in the UK. I've always been confident, outspoken, and ambitious, but here I feel like that makes people uncomfortable. I've been told I'm a lot more than once, and now I'm constantly editing myself. I don't know if I'm adapting to a new culture or slowly shrinking my personality to fit in. How do you adjust without losing who you are?"
God, don't get me started. The UK sometimes can be very bad vibes.
Very
Right?
bad vibes.
Very. I'm glad you even acknowledged that too, Anisha. Like, it actually makes me sad to hear that your like confidence and your natural just like I don't know, social nature rubs people the wrong way here. But I'm not surprised, unfortunately. I think the UK generally is quite reserved. The UK also encourages people to dull their ambition, in my opinion. And the UK also encourages people to be humble, but in a way that I think is personally quite detrimental. I don't think confidence is an issue. Confidence, when it's not arrogant, is completely healthy. I think when people are arrogant, they pit themselves against other people. They're insulting towards others, unkind towards others, or they boost themselves up in a way that encourages them to compare themselves to others in an attempt to put others down, right? Or they're very just dismissive in general of other people's opinions, thoughts, and voice. But when you're confident, you're just secure in yourself. So assuming you're not doing anything negative, like dismissing other people, talking over them, or comparing yourself to others, and you're generally just sure of yourself and certain of yourself, my advice to you is actually stay exactly as you are. Do not allow the UK to dim your light and to just kind of eradicate this sureness that you possess. Even sometimes, I kind of feel like that at times. I'm not going to lie. Like when I'm in the UK, not all the time, but there have been certain situations where sometimes I feel like I don't want to say bubbly, but sometimes I feel too friendly in certain social settings or too positive. That's it. Sometimes I feel too optimistic for England. I feel like people in England often tell themselves they're realists when actually a lot of British people, in my opinion, are pessimists. And I think like America tends to encourage leaning towards optimism. You even see it in the sporting world a lot when you compare like cultural differences between countries. You'd see like the British participants get to I don't know, the start of the track field to run their race. They're just kind of quiet, focus, or they'll have interviews and they're like, I'm just, looking forward to the best outcome. And, we're going to give it our all. We're going to try our best. And then you see the American get interviewed, or you see them at the start of the track field and they're like, yeah, we're gonna win. Yeah, we got this. God's got us. Oh my God, this is gonna be the best race. I'm gonna try my best, but you know what? I came here to win. And I don't feel like that's a bad thing. Like having that level of sureness and certainty. So please remain as you are. I think if anything, the important thing you need to do while you're in the UK is just find your tribe. Because in and amongst the naysayers and the pessimists and the people who encourage you to dull yourself, or they want you to be hyper humble in a way that's detrimental, there will be people who are reaching for the stars, who have such strong self-belief, who want the very, very best, and who aren't ashamed of that, and who are unapologetically themselves. So I think it's about finding your tribe and leaning towards those types of people. And I do think if you want to find your tribe and you're someone who's like very sure of yourself and hyper confident, I feel like you should try and get into some creative spaces. I think creatives generally in the UK, from what I can see anyway, they tend to be the people typically more who are like, they don't allow themselves to like to stick in a box, right? They don't allow people to box themselves in. They don't allow themselves to be defined by other people's opinions or like the status quo. So try and head to more creative spaces, like go to creative events, creative functions, and I'm sure you will find people who are just like you. Producer Anisha, could we get dilemma number 2, please?
So this one says, Hi, Toni. I'm so happy the podcast is back. Ah, so we. I'm 31 and I split my time between the UK and the US for work. One thing I generally can't wrap my head around is how differently people share their lives online. Americans I know post everything from their therapy sessions, career wins, their morning routines, soft launches that turn into hard launches in 2 weeks. Meanwhile, my UK friends act like posting more than once a month is a cry for help. Here's where I'm a bit stuck. I want to build my personal brand because it actually helps my career, and when I'm in the US, it feels totally normal. But the second I'm back in the UK, I feel embarrassed, like I'm trying too hard or showing off. To make it worse, I'm seeing someone in the US who's very online. I like them, but part of me panics that my British friends are watching and judging every post. Am I overthinking this, or is oversharing generally more socially acceptable over here in America? And at what point do you stop editing yourself for two different cultures without ruining your brand or even your relationship?
See what I mean about the UK? And this is why I said, even in the earlier dilemma, Anisha, that sometimes I feel like more American with certain like cultural habits. Like I'm very British in a lot of ways, but there are certain things I do that I just don't align with like the status quo here, right? And this is a good example actually, because I totally relate to this. Like I am someone who I don't care, like posting relationships, whatever, right? Posting about opportunities, posting my opinion, sharing bits about like family. Like I just post whatever I want to post. Like I don't judge people for doing that, but the UK can be so judgy, so judgy. And I also think maybe sometimes so over analytical. And I think there are a lot of projections. I mean, generally across the world, it's not a UK thing. People often project, like, if they're too scared to do something, they will judge other people for doing it. Or if they have certain opinions about how they live their lives, when it comes to certain categories of their life or aspects of their life, they will judge people for sharing those things. So it's just funny to hear this because I'm listening and I'm like, this is so true. This is so true. And to be fair, there's even like additional nuance here because I think you can even get a bit deeper when you look like within certain racial groups and certain habits within racial groups. Because I think that the way Black people approach posting certain things on social media is different from, say, white communities or even Asian communities and what they're willing to post on social media. There are some elements of life that, say, Asian communities would never post that white communities would, or Black communities would never post that other communities would. Like, there's also that to consider. And then there's gender too. But before we start talking about the intersectionality of posting, what I will say is yes, I agree. I do think that for the most part, the way British people and Americans use and utilize social media is quite different. And I understand why you might be nervous, especially when it comes to building your brand on UK soil. But one thing I have learned through my own experience is that visibility is valuable. I know people often say like it's not about how many people see you and what you're doing in public, it's about what you're doing behind closed doors and let the fruit speak for themselves. Like I get that sentiment, but I think that quote like rang more true in, I don't know, 1998 or 2005. But we live in a digital age now where people are acquiring information online. You look at platforms like YouTube, there are certain cohorts in society that watch more YouTube than they do general television. Times are changing, right? And if you want to succeed in your business or with your personal brand building, I personally believe that you need to have some sort of online presence. Now, that's not to say you need to platform yourself or you need to share your personal life if you don't want to, but online presence, I think, is a necessary part of brand building nowadays and reaching certain groups. For example, Gen Z, the majority are not going to pick up a newspaper. They're not going to switch on their telly to find key information. They're going to go online. So the advice I'm going to give you is kind of similar to the advice that I gave for dilemma number one. please do not let the UK kill your business. Don't let the UK and its judgmental nature kill this opportunity you have to grow your personal brand. Now, when it comes to what you share, I equally don't think you have to share things just because your American friends are sharing things. You personally need to be comfortable with what you're sharing. There's nothing I share that I'm not comfortable sharing. And I share on the basis of my own opinions, right? And what I think would be beneficial for people to see as a result of either what I'm building, what I'm planning, or how I'm trying to help people or motivate people or inspire people. The main thing I think you need to ask yourself is intent. What is my intent? What is my intention when I'm sharing this stuff? Am I sharing to entertain? Am I sharing to inspire? Am I sharing to motivate? Or am I sharing because I'm being pressured? Or am I sharing to show off? Like, you need to consider your intent. And if you believe in your heart of heart, your intent is positive and this thing that you are sharing will have a positive impact, then by all means, share it. But share it with the knowledge that the minute you put it out there, it is there for public dissection. And you have to be very confident in yourself to handle any kind of public dissection that comes with it. There's a lot that I share. People come for my looks, people come for my relationship, people come for my family, people come for all sorts of stuff. And I know what my sharing comes with. For that reason, you don't often see pictures of my niece and nephew. You don't often see my parents. There are a lot of things you don't often see because I don't necessarily want people to come for those things. So you might get glimmers here. But when it comes to things like my relationship, my man can very much handle himself. Like, he will happily troll people back, right? So I have no issue sharing stuff about him. I have no issue sharing stuff about myself because I'm very confident. There's nothing people can say to me that will make me second guess myself. But if you're not as strong, then that's where you also need to question like whether you can handle the public opinion. So yeah, I'm going to summarize by saying the internet's not going anywhere. Digital footprint is forever, so be mindful of that. But also digital influence, I think is very important when it comes to garnering some success nowadays. It's not 100% necessary depending on your field. Like, if you're a doctor, for example, it's not that necessary. If you're an actor, it's not that necessary. But if you're trying to build an online brand, it is very necessary. So just be sure that you're happy to post whatever you post. And if that's the case, then don't let the UK kill your brand. Producer Nisha, what do you think about those answers? Are you happy with them? Do you want to add anything?
I'm so happy with them. All I'm going to say is the conclusion that I've drawn from both of these dilemmas is that the UK is bad vibes. Unfortunately, the truth is in the pudding. Is that the saying? The truth is in the pudding?
Yeah, the proof is in the pudding.
The proof is in the pudding. But just do whatever makes you happy, guys. Whatever floats your boat. It's your life.
That's a nice summary. Do whatever makes you happy. And if posting makes you happy, do it. And if being confident and outspoken and out there makes you happy, keep doing that. If you guys have any dilemmas that you would love for me to answer, please drop them in our mailbox, tony@tonytoldmepod.com, or you can hit us up via Instagram DMs or Instagram comments if you're comfortable sharing out loud. And you know what? Send us juicy stuff. I actually really love today's dilemmas. I think like those are great dilemmas because not only do they kind of like work well with our theme, I love the fact that we got one from a guy. And I also love the fact that these topics are topics we haven't necessarily discussed before. Like, we've covered romance, we've covered love, dating, we've covered confidence, we've covered body image, we've covered all that stuff, but we haven't really covered the difference between the US and UK. And I think that segues very nicely into the sisterhood spotlight and our topic for the week: living in America versus living in England. So as you know, I am currently spending half my time or half my year in the US and half my year in the UK, with the view that I will eventually be in the US pretty much full time. I have spent so much time here that I feel like I have acquired a good understanding, or at least I've made good observations regarding the differences between the UK and the US. And I want to talk about some of those today. Number one, I'm going to start with the food. The food. There is an obvious difference as far as I'm concerned, in, I think, quality of the food and the way food is cooked and the style of food. Some people may not like this, and I'm sorry if I'm going to upset the Americans. Food in America can be very delicious. I'm not going to dispute that. It can be very delicious. But for the most part, I'm hyper aware of ingredients when I shop. And I'm also aware that generally it is significantly less healthy, in my opinion, than food that you generally get in the UK. Now, there are reasons for that. The ingredients, for example, high fructose corn syrup is something that I find in a lot of US groceries. It's something that doesn't, okay, it's not that it doesn't exist in the UK, but I believe that you're not allowed to put high fructose corn syrup in foods in the UK or in Europe for that matter. There are certain candies that you buy in the UK that in the US have E numbers, and those same candies don't have those E numbers in the UK because it's not allowed. Or even things like bread, like bleached bread that you can get in America that you just don't get in England, or chlorinated chicken. There's lots of dodgy stuff. I remember buying salmon once upon a time while I was with, we were in our old apartment and I was with Taiwo, and I was like, oh, I really want some smoked salmon. I bought this smoked salmon. I opened it and then I noticed on my hands like this orange tinge, and I looked at the salmon and it was almost like it had been coated with orange highlighter. It was so orange. So I was like, what the hell is going on? Why do I have this staining on my hands? And then I looked at the back and it had been colored, like literally colored. And I was like, what the hell? I threw it straight in the bin. But I have never, ever run into salmon like that in my life in the UK. So there's the food element of things. And I do think that has contributed to all the womb watchers assuming I'm pregnant. But you know what? I go into more detail on that in episode 1 of the Patreon. So if you want to find out more about my opinions on these people, head over to Patreon for the unfiltered truth. But the food in general is quite different. And I do think Americans season their food more. So when I do go out to eat, it is highly seasoned. It's often delicious, but sometimes it's so seasoned to the point that I'm like, this is a little salty. This is a lot. But I think that people grow accustomed to what they get used to and what they have access to all the time. Because when my American friends, oh, don't forget the portion sizes. Jeez Louise, bloody hell. When I eat in America, if I eat in a restaurant, I always take it to go. And if I order, like say on DoorDash, which is like our Deliveroo in the UK, when I order food in, one meal will always stretch to at least 2 minimum, sometimes even 3. The portions are insane. Even humble like junk food, you go get a large in the UK versus like a large in America. The sizes are insane. So there's the food element. The weather. Now, obviously, America is frigging massive. Sometimes I think people forget how big America is. To put it into perspective, the United Kingdom is smaller than the state of Texas. If I drive 4 hours from London, I'm in a whole different part of the UK. I'm basically at the end of the United Kingdom, right? If I drive 4 hours from Houston, I'm still in friggin' Texas. It's friggin' massive. And I think that contributes to differences in travel. I think the average Brit, maybe not even the average, but I think a lot of British people travel. No, I would say actually, no, the average Brit travels out of the country. The average Brit travels out of the country, and many, many people in the UK have traveled beyond the UK, but it's not uncommon to run into Americans who have only ever traveled within America. And a lot of Americans, I think, if not the majority, do not own a passport. So there's that difference as well. I think people tend to travel internationally more when they're British, but I think that also is impacted by the sheer size of the US. If I travel 4 hours from London, I'm in Greece. If I travel 4 hours by plane from America, I'm still in America. They're traveling. But America is so big that they generally travel within America. And to be fair, there's a lot going on here. So if I want a beach vacation or a tropical-ish style vacation, I could go to Puerto Rico. I could go to Hawaii, for example. I do not need a passport, I believe, to go to those places. I could go to Miami for a beach day. I could go to Florida. If I wanted to be in the mountains, I could go to, it's mountain. It's, I think Colorado is like mountainous region. If I wanted desert, I could go to Arizona. If I wanted snow, there are places I can go. And America as well, because it's so big, it can be so culturally different depending on where you go. Like, I don't think it's even fair to compare America to London. You have to compare country by country because different parts of UK are very different to other parts. Like London and Yorkshire are quite different, right? The same is true for New York and Arkansas, or California and Texas. Very, very different culturally. So there's that. Another significant difference, I think, is just cultural attitudes towards like socializing and just temperament. People in the UK, we kind of like touched on it in the dilemmas. I think people are kind of like a bit more reserved and a little bit more pessimistic and maybe not as outgoing or like as outwardly confident. I think the average American is a bit more social and generally like a little bit more optimistic in the way they speak day to day and more friendly towards strangers. If I am in London and I enter a lift and there are people in the lift, 9 times out of 10 it's just going to be silent. No one's going to say anything to me, or I get on a train or whatever. Ain't nobody saying nothing to me. Or I walk past someone on the street, nobody's saying a thing. In America, again, let me be specific actually, in Texas, because there are parts of America I've been that are not as friendly as Texas. But Texas, I guess, has Southern hospitality, and it's like a term to refer to just like how Southerners are typically like more friendly. I think in the UK, it's actually the other way around. So I think Northerners are generally nicer than Southerners, even though like I live in the South. I think people up north are generally nicer. And in America, they say like people down south are generally nicer. So I'm walking in the street, I get in a lift or whatever, you always hear like, hi y'all, hey, good morning, good afternoon, da-da-da. Like, everyone seems so friendly. And don't get it twisted, I know that like not everyone is friendly, but I think the general like cultural consensus is that you greet people even if they're a stranger, especially down here in the South. I mean, racism, it could get a bit dark, but I'm going to talk about it anyway because you have to. Covert and overt. I think racism in the UK is generally quite covert. It's there, but it's not so loud and obvious. In the US, it's definitely a little louder and a little more obvious. Like if someone is racist in the UK, you may not necessarily know. Like they might just be nice as pie to your face and then later insult you behind your back. I mean, that can happen here too, but I think generally here people are a bit louder with their hatred. I'm starting to think, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because it's like what you see is what you get, and you're in a position where you can make an informed decision if you know like someone hates you. But at the same time, it's like, damn, this is a lot. This is a lot. So there's that cultural difference. And even in our politics, like I think America is a place of like political propaganda. We have a bit of that in the UK too, but it's not so obvious. Like it's weird to me how you'll see adverts here where people are like dissing their political opponents. And in the UK, I mean, they diss each other, but not in such a like Hollywood way, if that makes sense. Oh, speaking of adverts, oh my God, you know what's so weird for me? Switching on my TV while I'm in the US and seeing pharmaceutical ads. That's so weird to me. That is not a thing in England. Like, that's not legal. I mean, I think we even recently, correct me if I'm wrong, producer Nisha, I swear we recently banned junk food adverts in the UK. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so we can't even advertise a burger in England now, let alone drugs. In America, you'll literally be watching TV and then you'll see this advert come up. There's a smiling lady hugging her kids, kissing her husband, going for a jog. And it's like, choose Rimerol for all your depression needs. And then in fine print, there's like, Rimerol could cause suicide ideation, heart disease, cancer, this. Speak to your physician for more information. And I'm like, what in the actual hell? Like, what the hell? Like, there's an advert for a drug that has side effects as serious. Like, what the hell? Like, that seems pretty intense. Like the fact that that can even be advertised on television, insane to me. So yeah, there's the pharmaceutical element, but I think that's tied into like the differences in healthcare. So healthcare in the United States is like privatized. And obviously in the UK, we have the NHS. So you still have private healthcare, but for the most part, we have universal healthcare, if you will, that is paid for via taxes. And because of the privatization of healthcare in the United States, I think that pharmaceutical companies, they have a lot of influence, which isn't, in my opinion, necessarily a good thing. But yeah, they have a lot of influence and it is a business. And I think because it is a business, that contributes to it being significantly more expensive. Now, even universal healthcare aside, just access to like drugs. A drug that you could get in the UK for, say, a tenner, you might get in America for $300, which is really, really sad. Or a treatment that you can get in the UK if you went private for £20,000 might cost you $80,000. And because healthcare is so expensive, obviously a lot of people have health insurance, but then they're paying hundreds every single month to cover their health. And if you can't afford health insurance, then it's literally like Russian roulette. You just need to hope you don't get sick. You need to hope you're not in an accident because that could essentially leave you bankrupt. But with that said, one positive of the US is that the pay generally here is a lot higher. So yeah, I know people are paying $200, $300 a month for their health insurance, sometimes even more if they have an existing health condition or chronic health condition. But they're also earning like 3 times what my friends are earning in the UK. So here's an example. Like in the UK, I think the average nursing salary is like 20 something thousand. I think in the US, it's like 50 or 60 something thousand. So that's just one example. And people are like, oh, you need to account for the difference in currency. That obviously like £1 is not $1. Yeah, but it's not like what it was back in the day where $2 to a pound. Now it's like 1.4 or 1.3 or something like that. It's not super strong. The pound is not super strong anymore. So it's still a significant difference. I remember when I was first dating Tyler and we were looking into like the future and our plans and where we would live. And we considered living in the UK. And Tyler said, okay, he was working for a different company at the time. He said, let me look at getting a transfer. And when he looked at getting his transfer, his income would have been more than halved if he moved to England. So someone in the US could be earning in a professional setting, let's say they're earning $130,000 a year. That same job in the UK, £50,000. Isn't that insane? Isn't that insane? Even influencers. All my friends who live in America are influencers. I swear, like every other influencer I know who's American has like a Birkin bag. If they don't, they have a 3,000 square foot home. In the UK, oh my God. I have friends in America. The jobs we do for like a certain amount of money, they get 10 times the amount for the same job. So America across the board pays better aside from minimum wage jobs. That's another difference between America and the UK. If you work a minimum wage job, you live on tips. You don't depend on your employer to pay your salary because you couldn't live. You couldn't afford to do anything. You depend on the average American citizen to pay your salary via tips. And I think that system, the average minimum wage earner ends up earning more than the average minimum wage earner in the UK simply because they acquire so many tips, even though their pay is rubbish. I think in some states, in Alabama, what is it, like less than $5 or $5? It's really bad, really, really bad. But yeah, they get tips. And in the UK, we don't typically tip. Like in Europe, tipping is not really a thing. So that's another difference. Scale of homes. I said earlier that the UK is smaller than the state of Texas and you feel it in the size of homes. Oh my God, homes in England are like matchboxes compared to a lot of the homes in America. Now, there are parts of America where it's just like that, like New York. I have a friend who lived in New York and his apartment was tiny. Like the kitchen was in the bedroom and the bedroom was in the living room. It was shocking, right? Thank God he doesn't live there anymore. But so there are places where homes are tiny, but generally across the board in America, homes are typically larger than the average home in the UK. Don't get me started on Texas. Oh my God. They say everything is bigger in Texas. They're not lying. Big cars, big trucks, like cars on the road that look like monster trucks to me. Big cars, big houses. There are houses here that would cost you the same as a 1-bed flat on the edge of London. And not even London, like let's even go to suburbia. Let's go to like, I used to go to university in Brunel, in Uxbridge. A lot of people are like, that's not London. So, but it's on the train line, right? End of the Metropolitan line. But let's say Uxbridge. You're on the very, very, very edge of Greater London, right? You could buy a 1-bed flat there for the same price. You would get a 4-bedroom house in Texas. The house might even have a pool if you go to the suburbs. Crazy. So that's a big difference too. And obviously there's the accent thing. For the most part, I think Americans appreciate and like the British accent more than British like American accents. I personally have always liked the American accent. I've never had an issue with it. A lot of my friends, I mean, again, America is so big. There are certain accents I like more than others. The Valley Girl accent is very different from the Southern Houston accent, which is very different from the New York accent. And it's quite like the UK, like Birmingham accent, Liverpool accent, Yorkshire accent. We have lots of different accents in such a small country, but there are so many different accents here. But for the most part, when you're British, people really, really love it here. Like, it's great. I get compliments all the time just for speaking. So that's fantastic. Whereas in America, I think there are groups of people that love the American accent, but there are also groups of British people, again, being bad vibes, that really, really hate the American accent. I have so many British friends who find it grating, whereas I think generally the consensus here is that the British accent is really, really lovely and people love the sound of it. So I use that to my advantage. I feel like when I'm in America, I get that little bit more British, at least when I'm like out and about with Taiwo. And I think he notices it too. Because like if I'm with him, say for example, I want a drink, I might be like, babe, can you get me a drink, please? And it's just whatever. And I'm out and I'll be like, excuse me, what's the best drink you have on the menu? They're like, oh my God, you're British. I love it. It's great. When it comes to social life, I don't think I can make a fair comparison because I'm still growing a circle here. I'm trying to make friends here, whereas in the UK, like there are more people I know there. I have more friends. But I do think that it's really funny how UK people and US people talk about dating because everyone kind of complains about the same thing but in a different accent. American girls are like, US guys ain't shite. I need to find a UK man. And then UK girls are like, I've had enough of UK men. Trying to like find someone overseas. And on the basis of that, I do think that like generally when it comes to dating, there's good and bad everywhere. There's whack men in the UK, there's whack men in America, there's great men in America, there's great men in the UK. I think it's that simple. But I do notice some like cultural differences when it comes to like how people approach dating. For one, US women, in my opinion, are way more forward. No, not even US women. People in the US generally are way more forward when it comes to dating. I think a woman in the US, like going up to a guy and approaching a guy, making the first move, I don't think that is like a weird to witness because I think that generally like women here are just way more like confident, way more forward when it comes to like doing that. Whereas I think that in the UK, generally women would second guess that a bit more. I think it's the same for guys. I think guys will typically approach you more in America than in the United Kingdom. Even when I was single and I would visit America just socially for fun with my friends, I would always get approached way more in the US than I would in the UK. And obviously, as a person of color, especially when you're a black person, I think that just the sheer number of black people in the US also might contribute to that. If you're a black woman who dates black men or black man that dates black women, there are way more black people here. So you have more options. Whereas in the UK, even though we have a black community, it's obviously not as big as in the US. Another key difference that is very hard to ignore is the difference in crime. So I shouldn't even laugh, but there's crime everywhere. There's crime everywhere. In the UK, we have our own issues. America has its own issues. But I guess the nature of the crime, like gun crime in the United States is an epidemic. Like it's a big problem. It's a big problem. It's a real issue. And I guess I'm acutely aware of the fact that guns are very much a thing here, particularly Texas. I think Texas has the most guns per people, right? I think, no, more guns than people, in fact, I think is the only state. Correct me if I'm wrong, but basically there's a lot of guns in Texas. And I think that influences how I navigate here, especially in social settings. Like, I'm always a kind and polite person, but in one area of life that can get me a little riled up is on the road. And I'm not driving here, but I am aware that like eventually I will start driving and I have to curb my road rage for that reason. Or even when I'm out and about, like if anything pops off and I see like people arguing or people fighting, like my body will tense up and I'm like, babe, let's go. And Tyler was like, relax, it's cool. And I'm like, what if they shoot? Like, I'm just like very aware of like people possessing guns. And I think it just freaks me out because it's just too common, especially in a place like Texas. Like a lot of people have guns, and yeah, I think that is a bit scary for me. And I think generally the homicide rate here, gun-related crimes, I think it's the highest of any country in the West. I think, yeah, the United States has the highest rate of gun deaths, I believe. So that is a bit scary. That's a bit scary. But I think that you can kind of curb that by obviously being very picky about like where you go out, what times you arrive to places, when you leave places, who you spend time with. Because there are people who have lived in the United States all their life and they never come into contact with a gun. Although I won't go into a lot of detail, but I have seen a gun since being here. And when I say I've seen a gun, you see guns all the time. Police have them, security have them or whatever. But I mean, I've seen a non-police firearm since being here. So yeah, that's interesting when you're like out and about and you see, I've seen more than one actually, when you see people just casually, they have their gun, you know, and you go into restaurants and there's a sign at the front, please leave your gun in the car. I'm like, oh, okay, lovely. So it's getting used to that, like seeing the gun signs everywhere, like, oh, leave your gun. It's just the fact that they assume you would have one. That's really strange because you would never see that in the UK. Now, I say all this to say no place is perfect. Like, there are things I really love about the US. I talked about the homes. I talked about the pay. I talked about the weather. And there's stuff I love about the UK. I love the access to the NHS. I love the fact that I generally feel quite safe in the UK when it comes to, like, you know, no guns and stuff like that. And I love the fact that, yeah, UK is my home at the end of the day. But where I will give the US props, I mean, every country has its issues, but one thing I think that really stands out to me is adulting in the UK and the US, I think looks quite different. And I think it's different because of economic differences. I talked about the difference in how much people get paid, but also just the difference in house prices, the difference in lots of different things. I think it's easier to feel like you are an adult in America than in England. I feel like the standard of living in England is generally like, it's not easy. It's quite tough to buy your own home. It's quite tough to rent a place on your own. Financially, it's difficult. Like the rate of salary increases versus the rate of rent increases and home price increases. Like there's a massive disparity. Whereas in the UK, in the US, it's not been that bad. And I do think when I say young people here, I'm talking about like people in their 20s, people in their 30s. Adults, younger adults here feel more like adults and they're allowed to adult that little bit more. They have more financial independence and freedom because of the way the economy is set up versus how things are currently looking in the UK. So I do think that's a major difference I've noticed. Like in the UK, a lot of people are struggling to feel independent because money is just so tight. But in America, I think that, yeah, the average 27-year-old feels more like an adult. So how am I feeling about living here full time? I think when it comes to anything in my life, I take the good with the bad. And I'm not one to cry over spilt milk, and I'm not one to like dwell over things that I don't even want to say things I can't change because I could change this, but I'm not one to like regret my decisions or dwell over my decisions. I like to just take each day as it comes. So I'm feeling very positive. I think there are lots of benefits to me being here, especially when it comes to, I talked about my personality, and I do feel like my personality aligns with lots of like cultural differences here that I witness. And I'm excited. I'm excited for the future. I'm excited to hopefully earn more. I'm excited to like buy a nice big fat house. I'm excited to like raise my kids in an environment where they have loads of space, loads of room to play. So I'm excited to be in the US. And yeah, being with Taiwo, it feels lovely. It feels like home. And I talk about that a bit more in the Patreon episode with him. So go check that out. And for those of you who are thinking about moving to the US, I think I'm going to do a Patreon episode about how I'm doing it, the ins and outs of the legal part, like basically a Patreon on, so you want to marry an American, basically you want to move to America, not even you want to marry an American, because there are different ways to be living in the US. And I was actually going to go through a different route before I actually met Taiwo. And then after I met him, I was just like, oh, great. Like I've fallen in love. This is great. Let me just take a pause and see how this pans out. So there are different ways you can get to the US, and I will do a Patreon on that, advising people on some of the different ways. But aside from like the legal side that I'll go into on Patreon, I do think if you want to live in the US, what I would recommend is creating a 2-column list, pros and cons. If you can come up with more pros than cons, or at least pros that are bigger boxes for you. So say, for example, like standard of living in a big home. If that's a big one for you, then that's a bigger pro, right? But make a list of pros and cons, determine like where your values lie, like what's really important for you. What do you really, really value? What will you really, really struggle with? And that will help you determine whether you're making the right decision or not. Some of my friends could never move to the US because they couldn't be without their family and friends. And it's really, really tough for me, but I'm quite independent, so I'm able to manage. And some of my friends could never live in the UK long term because they have seasonal depression and they just hate the weather and it's always cloudy and they feel like they just need to get out to feel happy. They need some vitamin D and for that they want to move, and that's really significant. But make a list of pros and cons, then weigh up how meaningful each pro or each con is to you, right? And also consider social network or family network. I have family in the United States. If there was any kind of issue, I could take a 2-hour flight to Chicago and I will be with my auntie, with all my cousins, and it would be great. And likewise, like Taiwo's family is very, very close by. His twin sister lives very close by. He has another sister in Dallas. He has another sister who's just like a few hours away by plane. So I have community here. Do you have people in America, or will you be flying completely solo? And what might that look like for you? What might your living situation look like? It would have been super daunting if I had moved to the US on my own. I had to like rent an apartment or like do all of that by myself, and I would have to pay for several months of my rent in advance because I have no like credit history here or history here at all. And like coming and basically like moving into the apartment that my like husband had acquired for us made the process super easy. I have someone here who is an American citizen who can hold my hand through this entire process and who has been through the immigration process himself, because you have to remember that Taiwo grew up in Angola and Zimbabwe. He's Nigerian, but he grew up in Angola and Zimbabwe, and his dad really worked hard to get the whole family to the US. And Taiwo has, fair enough, he's been in the US for 16 years. He came when he was like, no, he's been in the US for, I think slightly more than almost 20 years. But he came when he was like 18, but he's been through that process. He kind of knows what that looks like. But also be mindful that the political climate right now, you have certain situations happening in the US that we can talk about more in detail later. You've got ICE, for example. So you have to consider, you know, those complications and the state of the US and some of the like turbulent things going on regarding or connected to like immigration in the United States, and how you would tackle that and whether you're comfortable tackling that or if that's too intense for you. So yeah, there's loads of stuff that you can consider and you should consider. But when it comes to moving anywhere, whether it's the US or other parts of Europe or moving, I have my best friend, she lives in Ghana. She moved to West Africa. She's not Ghanaian, but she moved to Ghana. When it comes to moving anywhere, weigh pros and cons and always have some savings, some emergency money, because God forbid there's an issue and you want to get the hell up out of there, you should be able to at the drop of a hat. So that's really important too. So as always, I end the podcast with some positive words. But before that, I'm just going to remind you guys to subscribe on YouTube. If you're watching this from YouTube, please drop a comment. If you're listening to this via Spotify or Apple, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast, please, again, drop a comment or like or do whatever you need to do to support the podcast. We would really appreciate it. And don't forget about our social media at Toni Told Me Pod on Instagram and on TikTok. And of course, the Patreon Toni Told Me Unfiltered, where I'm going to have lots of juicy tea for you on there. But positive words, what do I want to say? I think without sounding too whimsical, regardless of where you choose to move, I think it starts and ends with you. I think I can live anywhere and have a great time, and I can live anywhere and have a bad time, depending on the mindset I have when I approach the move. If you have recently moved and you're struggling, that's not uncommon. It's very typical in the early days of any big move to get a bit homesick or to feel a bit homesick. But I would say stick with it and try and do things to make your experience feel more positive. Try and change your perception. If you feel like, oh, I don't have a lot of friends here, I'm struggling with this, I'm struggling with that. Like sometimes it's just teething problems. When I think back to my parents moving to the UK, they moved to the UK with a suitcase each. They did not have much money at all. We were all living in a bed and breakfast at one point in one room. My parents struggled. They could have easily been like, F this, we're going back to Nigeria. But they stuck it out, and they stuck it out because they had a plan. People say, fail to plan, plan to fail. And I feel like that kind of rings true for moving. Never just move willy-nilly. Like if you have a plan, focus on your plan. What is your goal? Have tunnel vision and like be positive about like future possibilities. It might be hard in the beginning, but I assure you, if you maintain that positive outlook and you stick with it, things can and will get better. So I want to say that like it starts and ends with your outlook and your willingness to take the good with the bad and turn the bad on its head, or your willingness to approach everything one day at a time. And I think that's the same for me here. Like I just take it one day at a time. Like I'm not fretting about, oh, my kid's college education and how will I be able to pay for that? I'm not fretting about, oh my God, what if this happens and we need to pay for this healthcare thing and this operation? Oh God, what if I have sons and then the gun crime and this and that? I can't come and stress myself out. Like, I'm not going to get those gray hairs and all those wrinkles from stressing about things that haven't even happened yet. I just take every day as it comes, and I am positive about every day as it comes. So if you're listening and you've moved or you're thinking about moving, that's one piece of advice I want to give you. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Toni Told Me podcast. I will be back again on Tuesday. And don't forget that on Friday, we have a Patreon episode coming out. Bye, guys.